The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar, Know Your Customer, Expediting Name and Address Merges in Fiserv Premier. My name is Greg Richards. I'm the Director of Marketing here at EnableSoft and a speaker for today's event. A few ground rules before we get started. All attendees are in listen-only mode. We cannot hear you, but if you have any questions, please type them into the questions box that's on your screen. We'll answer as many of these as we can at the end of today's event. Any unanswered questions will be addressed within 48 hours of the webinar's close. And now, without further delay, let's get into today's topic, Know Your Customer, Expediting Name and Address Merges in Fiserv Premier. You're going to hear from two speakers today, again myself, Greg Richards, the Director of Marketing here at EnableSoft. But right off the bat, I'm going to bring on Rick Hebert, President of Rick Hebert and Associates. Just a quick agenda. We're going to do our best to have you out of here in 60 minutes today. We've already covered the introductions. In just a moment, I'm going to bring Rick on, and he's going to talk a little bit about standardizing your data. Then he's going to go into merge strategies and planning. Rick's then going to bring me on. I'm going to talk a little bit about the enabling technology, the empowering technology that makes these sorts of projects possible. I'm going to discuss a quick case study, and then we'll wrap things up again at the end with Q&A if there's time. So now I'd like to bring on Rick Hebert. Rick is the president, not coincidentally, of Rick Hebert and Associates. Rick's got over 40 years of experience in the financial services industry. 25 of those years have been spent serving Fiserv Premier banks just like yours. So please, Rick, take it away.
Well, before we get into the non-standardization piece, why are we here now, I guess would be the question. And as you know, a recent release moved the names and addresses from what used to be on the portfolio. It moved the names and addresses to a database of their own and provided many additional capabilities with the use of relationship codes, which allows for a more customer-centric model as opposed to a product-centric model. With relationship codes, they help us to define who our customer is, what the customer has with us, and with that information we can figure out what it is that we wish to offer to the individual customer. With the exception of but a few relationship codes such as owner, signer, and mailing address, relationship codes, because it's something new, it was not something that could be migrated from the former release, so they're there for you to utilize going forward, and as we go through this process, you'll be in a much better position to do that. Many inquiry and reporting capabilities result from the release, but in order to take advantage of them, we need to do CIF cleanup, standardization, and merging activities so that you will ultimately have hopefully one name, all of the information of the name available in a single inquiry, and one address as well. So far, we've done about 20 banks with this project, and it has significantly improved productivity and saved time. Now, as we know, anytime we have 3 people doing anything, you're going to have 2 different ways of doing it unless you have a standardization policy that you train and have people actually utilize. If you have 2 methods, you have inconsistency, and inconsistency equals wasted time. Wasted time means wasted money. That's what we're trying to eliminate. Communication is as good as the quality of your contact data. Your contact data, we're talking about email address, web address, password, security information, might be date of birth. There's additional information, client-defined information, such as favorite color, favorite number. There's a phone for business, cell, home, responsibility code, all kinds of data, all components of the name or components of the address. There's actually 20 different fields that are components of the address. There's a minimum of 66, and with additional information, there could actually be over 100 name components. So the benefit of standardization, there's guidance as people are doing data entry, consistency from the point of training folks, what they're actually doing, and the verification process to correct errors that other folks made. everybody's using the same standardization. As you're talking about addresses for standardization, comparatively speaking, addresses are much easier. Your standard addresses are going to be one of two things. This is a bank decision. Your addresses are either going to be fully spelled out, such as street, avenue, or what have you, or you'll have addresses with abbreviations. The abbreviated address standardization can be found if you want to use the Post Office Standard Abbreviations document or the Postal Office ZIP+4 guidelines. Either one of those would really give you a big head start on address abbreviations. But in either case, the number of characters or the number of address lines plus the 20 components that comprise an address are all things that need to be considered. On the benefit side, we have simplified maintenance, because rather than having 2 or 4 or 10 identical addresses, they might have different components, but instead of having multiple addresses, you have one address. Therefore, your maintenance when somebody changes their address is going to be reduced significantly. Mailing success, if you standardize your addresses, you're going to have less return mail as a result of that. And the end user experience is significantly improved right from the inquiry, including maintenance. Reporting is going to be a lot clearer. You won't have to have people looking at multiple addresses to pull different components from multiple like addresses. They'll just be looking at one. On non-standard addresses, this is just an example. So if you have 5 addresses, and these are what the address is, when you go to merge the addresses, if you're going to compare programmatically, the system's going to see these as 5 different addresses, but obviously you know that all of those records could go into one. You just need to pick what your standard is, and that's what all of your addresses should be. On the name side, standardization is much more complex because of the fact that you could have 66 at a minimum and virtually over 100 different components of the name. But you'll have a client-defined name such as Donald G. Duck, so you're looking for the first full name, middle initial, last name, or you might have a standard that says to use the middle name fully spelled out, so it might be Donald Goofy Duck. Other variations of the suffix to the name could be DBA, ITF, in trust for, representative payee, all kinds of those items. Those items could, depending upon your selected standard, remain as part of the name, or your name could be nothing but first name, middle initial, last name, and all of your suffixes could actually be relationship codes. On the benefit side of standardized names, of course, is maintenance. Very much like the addresses, you'll have a much better opportunity to know your customer from a single inquiry, as opposed to looking at 2 different names, making note of what one says, going look at the other name so that you can gather all of those different components. The end user experience is significantly improved as a result of single or at least reduced inquiry, maintenance, reporting, and marketing. So are the standard, are the 5 Donald Duck instances here. You would select one that would become your standard policy. In addition to the name itself, there's various name abbreviations identified here. Like I said, in some cases, some of these, rather than being a component of the name, would be a relationship code. Now we get into merge, and well, we have potential merge candidates, and we'll have merge candidates. In our potential merge candidates, there's going to be a much higher percentage of your database that's going to fall into this category as opposed to those that are exactly the same all across the board. So in my potential merge candidate, I'm looking at the components of the name, and I'm going to have instances that both components are populated, other instances where one is populated, one is blank, and then I'll have a whole bunch of non-standard variations. The easy non-standard variations, you might have two addresses. One has a zip code, the other one has a zip +4. Everything else is exactly the same. Your choice when you go to merge these would obviously be to maintain the zip +4 information as opposed to merging the zip +4 into the other address and thus losing the zip +4. The impact is going to be an impact on processing in some cases. So if I go to merge two names, for example, one has a password in a particular field, the other one does not. As you merge either names or addresses, all of the accounts that are tied to that respective name or address will be modified, re-indexed to point to the recipient. The other one did not have a password for telephone banking. I would want to maintain the password for telephone banking, but I might also say that maybe I don't want to merge these two names without doing some other thing, because if I do, all of the accounts that were previously tied to the name that did not have a telephone banking password on it would now be pointing to a name that does have a telephone banking password on it. If I have a name that has a suspect exemption flag set, meaning that that name line is excluded from OFAC, if I merge another name that didn't have that suspect filled in, all of the accounts that were tied to that other name would now have that suspect exemption. So as you're going through your standardization and merge process, you have to look at each field, understand what the field is, what the potential impact is, and make a decision of whether you're going to standardize and merge or not. In my merge candidates, like I said, these will be much less in quantity than your potential merge candidates, but these are very easy. This is going to be everything about a name is exactly the same. Everything about an address is exactly the same. There's other fields, other capabilities of the system that you might consider when it comes to the name. There's an account title. Account title might be, in some cases, what you want to use. There's an alternate name, and you might utilize that in some cases. There's also name format codes that identifies when that name is going to be used in different reports or notice forms. So all of those things have to be considered. For merging benefits, why is it that we're merging? Well, our goal is to have a single record, obviously. Having a single record instead of multiple eliminates having to have a piece of paper by me as I'm doing inquiry, so I can make note of the differences in my names or addresses. I will have a reduced, reduced maintenance. If I have 3 addresses I have to change, instead I now have one that's obviously going to be reduced maintenance there. Reporting will be improved, clearer, less manual combining of information, and I'm going to have a customer-centric marketing opportunity. All around an improved end-user experience and savings of time and money. This is really a bank-wide project, and the recommendation would be to have bank-wide involvement. Your committee members would be individuals from deposit loan services, information technology, operations, retail, loan area, audit and compliance. Don't exclude any particular area. You'll go back to these folks with questions about some piece of data that was not anticipated. As you identify all of your data and you extract your data and take a look at it, you're going to see things that you were not prepared for. During sit-down meetings, we discuss with your folks what the use of all of these different fields are, what kind of data we might see there, and invariably, as we're analyzing the data, we see a whole bunch of stuff. You end up going to one of these departments or another, and they're going to tell you, oh, yeah, 7 years ago, we were tracking such and such a thing. We created that additional information or a flex field, and you can get rid of that. We don't care about that data. Or it might be, oh, yeah, we forgot to say something about that, but that's very important to us. We want that data for some particular purpose. Once everybody is knowledgeable about what the process is and what the goal of the whole project is, they will relay or disseminate to their folks. So there won't be a, oh, what are they doing now? Or it'll just be, everyone will be informed. The working group won't be that huge committee. The working group is actually getting the job done. There'll be some operational involvement, information technology, little tiny bit on the network side, but it'll be folks that are basically CIF managers or very knowledgeable about CIF, knowledgeable about the decisions made for standardizing and going forward with this project. So a much smaller knit group of people that's going to actually get it done. Your major steps, project plan, number one, you'll start out with an initial project plan, and you'll add to that project plan as you go. Standardize policy, you can come up with a standardization policy for addresses, either using the USPS Postal Service. You got a couple of different options there. As far as standardizing the name, using the account title, alternate name format codes, those kinds of things, that'll be part of that policy. And then knowing your data. Identify what the real purpose of each one of these fields are, the various components of the name and the address. Understand what that data is, what's going to happen as two records are merged, what impact that might have on some third-party or interconnecting systems, such as internet banking, for example. You wouldn't want to merge two names that are going to have a potential impact to internet banking. If you don't do that right, you'll end up with one of two things. You'll end up with accounts now available in the customer experience within internet banking that were not available to them before, or the flip side of that, instead of having accounts in internet banking available to the customer, the accounts disappear. And the reason for that is going to be an interconnecting specification of another system that was relying on some component of the name that is no longer there or has been changed, and that would be a definite negative impact. Once you know your data, you have standardized, you will then extract from Prime. Various business analytic reports will be run to extract all that data. That will then be followed by an analysis process of that data to make sure that you not only know now what these fields are for, what the intended use is, but you see what the bank's use is now and ever has been. Process as you go after analysis, probably another item we would have here would be process documentation. As you're figuring, how do I go from here to where I want to be? How do I make this actual change? Document that process step by step as though it was going to be done in an entirely manual process. Obviously, my recommendation, as it has been when we put this thing together, is to utilize Foxtrot, because you're going to get done in a number of days or weeks instead of a number of months or years. But you have to define a documented process step by step to do it manually before you can automate those manual steps. You'll also have folks that are verifying data. Certain things might not merge, and they need to manually modify something and ultimately merge two records on a manual basis. So they would need those step-by-step instructions for that. Develop your change strategy. Now, there will be the potential for specification changes, not only in core, but possibly other systems. There'll be the potential for account level changes. Certain things on the account are relying on components of your name or your address, so you'll have to analyze that and potentially do account level changes prior to merging. The merge wizard that's provided in Navigator, fantastic tool as you line up names side by side or addresses side by side. All of the present values of the two records are shown there. And if you were doing it manually, you would either click a box on the left to say I want to maintain this value on the recipient, or click a box that's right across on the right to say I want to select the information on the donor record and bring it into my recipient record, which is my surviving record. Once you go through the various screens of these wizards, when you do choose to hit update, the system actually in the background, that one change, the merging of two names as an example, that one change will actually cause somewhere between 20 to 30 file maintenances across your database. The reindexing of accounts that used to point to the name that is now retired are going to reindex themselves to the name that is now my recipient, and many other back office or in the background changes are going to take place. As a result of that, one thing to consider right off the bat before you start any automated process for sure, or even the manual processes, is to look at the files in your file control file that are going to be impacted as a result of all of this file maintenance, because you don't want to take a chance that during the day you get this message that said the audit file is full or a recovery file is full and all your online suddenly for maintenance come down. Definitely don't want that to happen, so there'll be some operational files that you'll want to expand. Now that's if you're in-house, you're definitely going to do that. If you're in an outsource situation, you definitely want to contact your service bureau, let them know what kind of a project that you're about to start working on so that they too can be prepared. Their file sizes are probably much larger than they would anticipate would be a problem, but you never know. It's just a courtesy to make sure that there are no issues. Next step, retrain your personnel. You're going to not want people, while you're cleaning up and merging names and addresses, you don't want people to be adding additional duplicate name and addresses. So you want to retrain according to the standards that you have developed. You want to make sure that they're aware that there is a transition period. So you might have different steps within that transition period, but ultimately the goal is to have, wherever possible, single name, single address. There will be instances that it's not possible to have a single name and sometimes perhaps even a single address, but they're much less, certainly, as opposed to everything being that way now. Maintenance, like I said, manual steps for the maintenance, and if you're going to automate the maintenance, there's some steps that you'll add into your process for that automation. Verification, you have your file maintenance reports on a per application basis, as well as the CIF file. Do verify, if you're doing it manual or automatic, do verify those file maintenance reports. If someone has the wrong instruction or it's going to be wrong. So make sure the folks that are doing the verification are aware of the process, what the changes that they should be seeing are, so that they can catch an error like that right off the bat. If you're in an automated environment, even more important that you get right on top of that. Don't wait till, every other day I'll do the maintenance verification. Every single day, that's one of your top priorities, get that verification done, and if you need to modify or tweak the process, that is the time to do it. Other considerations, if you haven't done a purge of your core base for a long time, might be smart to do a purge prior to the start of this process, because you might end up having to merge less names and addresses if addresses and names are dropped because there are no accounts attached to them. Internet banking, make sure you understand what the potential impact or what the interconnectivity is from whatever your internet banking system is and the name record or the address record. Make sure that if that internet banking system is expecting a specific spot for a name or some specific piece of the name to be in, sometimes you have you can have 5 or 10 email addresses. If one of those particular positions of the email address is what internet banking is expecting to see, then you want to make sure that you don't move it. Telephone banking, we talked about already. There could be other third-party systems as well. Special handling, that would be primarily for use of addresses. There's a potential connectivity of a name component for electronic statements. You'll have numerous specifications on multiple systems. At a minimum, you might want to look at the options for CIS specs that were added in the most recent release as part of this project. So your change strategy would be utilizing the process that you documented step by step, done as though you were preparing to do this manually. For changes, depends on how many light changes you have. If I just needed to change 10 items, I would go and do that within a minute or two manually. Absolutely manual is the process. You'll get to a point that if it's X number or more, it makes more sense to do it in an automated fashion. How we work is to build a script, run the script, preferably in a test environment. But if there is no test environment, do it in a live environment, but do it on a select number of accounts. Do the validation of the file maintenance. If there's anything at all that's deviated, modify the script, retest, revalidate. Those various steps for few changes will take longer than if I just made the changes manually. So you got to do whatever makes the most sense there, but whatever is a automated process, you'll write the script, test the script, verify the information, retweak, retest. Ultimately, you'll run it live, and then you'll just modify your production. Now, one of the questions that would bound to be what comes out is how long does the process take? And it depends. Depends on the bank, depends on the quantity and complexity of your name components, depends on additional information or flex fields that you added, whether those flex fields are presently now available as core system components. You might have created a flex field, for example, years ago when CIP information was first required by the regulators. CIP was not core fields, so therefore you created flex fields for that. Since then, enhancements have come out from the core vendor. CIP information is now available on the name record. So you might have then started putting it onto the name record. You now have flex data with CIP information. You have core fields in the name record that have CIP information, and you need to, what you want to do is get it from the flex into the core, decide which one you're going to keep, and any other new core fields that have been created in recent years, like credit score, risk rating, various additional possible flex fields, and now in your core, you might want to clean all that up as part of the project. So depending upon all of that, depending on your data, number of people involved, number of licenses you might have, it's going to be a minimum of 17 days, 1 week and 2 days it takes to discover your data, guide you on standardization, and then there'll be scripting time, address merging, address standardization, followed by name merging, name flex, and preparatory things preparing for that name merge. So all of that, minimum of 17 days, How long it could take is much longer than that in some cases, like I said, depending upon the complexities of your particular institution. If you have Foxtrot already, you are already knowledgeable of how to use it, then less time than actually the 17 or any additional number of days. Less time could be our involvement as a result of your being capable of writing more of the scripts or all of the scripts yourself. So with that, I will now turn it over to Greg, who can show you Foxtrot and what is possible.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick, for joining us today and for talking to us about data standardization and merge strategies. Certainly we will be bringing Rick on a bit later for some Q&A. But first I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what who EnableSoft is and what we're all about. Foxtrot is really all about what's possible today. We're an innovator in productivity and efficiency software solutions. We've been doing it for the better part of about 2 decades now. We're a partner to nearly 500 banks and credit unions. That number includes about 130 or so Fiserv Premier institutions, just like yours. We're also fortunate to call about 1/3 of the top 1,000 and 1/2 of the top 100 financially performing banks as customers. And not to rub it in for those attendees who are located in the Northeast today, but we are located in warm, sunny, and snow-free Orlando, Florida. So Rick has talked to you all about data standardization, customer standardization, and data merging, the strategies, the logic behind it. Let's talk a little bit about, as I called it earlier, the enabling or the empowering technology that makes this sort of project possible. We'll show you a video of Foxtrot in action here in just a few minutes, but this really is Foxtrot. So we call Foxtrot here at EnableSoft the digital employee. And why we call it that, I'll get into reasons in just a few moments here, but Foxtrot is software, true enough. It's software that works directly with Fiserv Premier, enters and changes data just like you would, right in the user interface or the presentation layer of Fiserv Premier, and it does it with intelligence, and that's really why we call it just like a digital employee. Foxtrot allows users to focus on building value for the organization, and that's really important. So rather than spending time manually merging customer data, standardizing customer data, spending time on those kinds of projects, or spending extra time developing reporting, developing those next great products, or spending extra time serving customers because your data is not standardized and you cannot envision the total customer portfolio like you want to be able to do, Foxtrot instead allows you to do that, performs that work for you, so you can focus on the valuable task of serving customers and growing your organization. Foxtrot really is the ideal solution in lieu of costly outsourcing or programming, and we'll talk to you a little bit about those methods here in just a minute. So you do have options. Rick talked about standardizing your data manually. That's one option. There's also some other options with regard to custom programming and outsourcing, and we've kind of listed those here. So your first option is MUPs, manual unstructured processes. That's doing a project by hand, essentially. Custom programming, if you are fortunate enough to have an IT department who has the manpower and the wherewithal to develop a custom program or a macro to automate these sorts of projects, you're certainly at an advantage here, and that might be one option to consider. And, of course, outsourcing, perhaps to a third party or your core vendor to come in and perform this work for you in lieu of manual processes and in lieu of custom programming. But in any case, whether you do it by hand or whether you outsource help to come in and help you, chances are there's going to be some amount of manual data entry and manual data maintenance required. So in any customer data standardization and merge project, these are essentially the steps we're requiring. So you, the individual, is represented by the orange figure there on the left. The first step, as Rick talked about, is standardizing our merge candidates. If we're using names, then we need to standardize our names. So here we have Mickey Mouse. We're in Orlando, so we're using Mickey Mouse today. And all of it is disparate in various accounts that unfortunately really make it difficult for us to be able to view the total customer relationship. We have them existing in different places for each of his different accounts. So Mickey Mouse spelled one way for his checking account, Mickey Mouse Jr. for his savings, Mickey G. Mouse for his money market account, and so on. So the first step here, obviously, again, is to standardize that data by hand so that each of Mickey Mouse's accounts, each of the merge candidates in those accounts look the same, and all of the data is standardized in a way that allows us to merge the data effectively. And then, of course, in step 2, we're actually merging that data such that we can see all of Mickey Mouse's accounts listed underneath him. And again, we have essentially reinvented or recreated that customer portfolio, and we can again see his total customer relationship. What's missing from this chart, however, is the time and effort required to do it. So you heard from Rick, rather, a little bit earlier tell you that Foxtrot can perform this sort of project anywhere from a number of days to a number of weeks. If done manually, you could be looking at weeks to months, and then possibly beyond if you're performing this type of project manually by hand. And then, of course, you've got to factor in all the errors, fat finger and data entry errors that are inherent in any sort of manual process when people are involved. Conversely, of course, with Foxtrot, the project starts the same with you, but instead of you actually entering data and changing data and standardizing data, Foxtrot is performing that work for you. So in this case, as we'll show you in just a minute, we are creating a script, which is essentially just a series of steps or actions that you're telling Foxtrot how to run. You're giving Foxtrot your merge candidates and your field names, and then you're allowing Foxtrot to go to work. Foxtrot then essentially automatically standardizes those names and merges them just like you would want done, just like you would do manually. But again, this is done automatically, so you're off doing other things. All of this, of course, with Rick and his services and his guidance, they come in and handle probably 80 to 90% of the scripting ahead of time, and then working with you in your particular instance of Fiserv Premier can help you actually execute on the merge and standardization process. So name and address merges with Foxtrot. So Foxtrot, as we talked about, automates manual name and address merge workflows. It works in the user interface of Fiserv Premier, and that's important. It's important because in working in the user interface and the presentation layer, all of your audit trails, all of your business rules are maintained. Fiserv Premier, and any application for that matter, sees Foxtrot as just another user. So all of those rules and all of that security are maintained just as if it was another person. Foxtrot follows rules you define to merge like records, So you're creating the rules, you're creating the script for Foxtrot, and then Foxtrot is simply executing on what you tell it to do perfectly over and over again. So here's Foxtrot in action. So this is a bit dated, we'll admit. This is Foxtrot on the right, and here we have on the left an older instance of Fiserv Premier. Why we chose this particular application, although this is not a data merge project, it is a great application to see exactly how Foxtrot enters data into fields, chooses data from drop-down menus, changes dates, changes officer codes. This happens to be a statement code update application here that we're seeing Foxtrot execute inside of Fiserv Premier. So on the right-hand side on Foxtrot, in the middle, you see a scripting center. These are the series of steps that someone has written in conjunction with Fiserv Premier 3. You essentially drag and drop the mouse over Fiserv Premier, and it presents you with a list of options and a list of actions to take that are compatible with the application you've chosen. It's then a matter of pushing play and watching Foxtrot, as we see now, navigate through the script and execute each step in that script as it enters data and changes data and maintains data. So this particular video and application is great because you can really actually see the data being entered into these fields, and again, menus being chosen and selected. So in just a second here, we will see Foxtrot tell us that it's done running, I believe, 6 records. Of course, Foxtrot can run thousands and thousands of records, essentially how many ever records you need to have run. And that is essentially Foxtrot in action. So again, Foxtrot works like a digital employee. Why? Because it enters and changes data in Fiserv Premier like you would, does it with intelligence, does it in the user interface of the application, works directly with Fiserv Premier, allows you to focus on building value, and it allows you to forego the costly outsourcing or custom programming that you might otherwise need to engage in this sort of data standardization and merge project. But Foxtrot is much more than just name and address merges. Foxtrot can be used for card breach recovery, and I'll kind of highlight that in the case study we have coming up here. In the wake of a major card breach, Foxtrot can be used to automatically cancel and reissue thousands of cards, note customer accounts, notify them via email, and so on. Coding updates, officer code, responsibility codes, that sort of thing. Data conversions. assess fees like overdraft fees or change overdraft elections, onboarding loans if you're using, let's say, a D&H LOS platform to integrate with your current Fiserv Premier core system, account opening and closing, even something as routine as that, but as time-consuming as that, can be automated with Foxtrot in very little time. So this is a case study. This is a Fiserv Premier Bank located in the Midwest, a $2.2 billion financial institution. One of the reasons they acquired Foxtrot actually was in lieu of a name and address merge, they actually elected to create flex fields and then create unique identifiers that would essentially help them to identify each of the accounts for a particular customer. They can run reports for each of those unique identifiers, and from those, obviously, identify the total customer and account relationship for each of those accounts. When they acquired Foxtrot, they had 118,000 of those changes to be done. Now, before Foxtrot, that's something that would be essentially impossible to do by hand, and 118,000 records to insert and populate each of those flex fields. With Foxtrot, however, that job was done in about 2 weeks. Foxtrot, in this case, worked at about 8 records a minute, and they still use Foxtrot in an ongoing way to add and update flex fields on newer accounts at a rate of about 1,000 per month. This particular bank, from a more routine task sort of standpoint, they use Foxtrot for responsibility code maintenance, anywhere between 1,000 to 5,000 a month. Before Foxtrot, it was something that a branch administrator would perform as his or her time permitted. Now Foxtrot does it automatically behind the scenes at a clip of about 8 records a minute. Dormant card maintenance. This particular financial institution had a business rule where debit cards that had gone inactive or unused for a period of 8 months had to be assigned or changed to a dormant status and effectively canceled. Prior to Foxtrot, that was a very manual process. Somebody would have to go in and spend about a minute a record on about 10,000 records a year. That's 10,000 minutes a year. That's something like 150 hours per year that they would spend just on this one process. With Foxtrot, Foxtrot handles it in about 2 seconds per account, and of course it's done automatically, so they've regained that 150 hours per year. So that, in a nutshell, is Foxtrot and how it operates on many things, but especially on name and address standardization and merge projects for Fiserv Premier financial institutions. The time now has come for Q&A. I would invite you, if you haven't done so already, to please use the Q&A or the question and answer box on your screen to type in some questions, and we will do our level best to answer them. So this first question, probably best for you, Rick, if you're on the line. The question reads, how does the use of the relationship code for the suffix impact the RCM file sent to EFT for debit card maintenance?
I do not know.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's something probably, Jeff, if you're listening, that we can probably answer offline at the end of the event. So we'll go ahead and move on to the some of the next questions here. Forgive me as I read them and look at some of our questions. Can I build scripts in test environments and then use them in production, or will I need to recreate them? Rick, that'd be a good one for you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can do exactly that. You build them in tests, and then you just run them in production. You're building the script on a PC. That PC, to be running on tests, is connected to a Navigator server that is running on the mainframe. In tests, you simply sign now into Navigator on the mainframe, and you execute the same exact script. You're actually not even copying it. You're just using the same PC to do that.
Okay. So we have a question here. I'm going to ask for some a little bit of elaboration here, but this Foxtrot, excuse me one second. Does Foxtrot work off the simulated automatic name merge report, or are banks extracting this data with business analytics to find matches?
You're extracting data using business analytics, and you're likely massaging that data in a series of Excel files prior to feeding it then into Foxtrot.
Okay.
Foxtrot also has logic whereby you can screen scrape data from the navigator field, bring it into Foxtrot, do a comparison of that Excel housed data, make a decision based on that, and then move data back into the navigator.
Next question here, how many records can Foxtrot handle? Yeah, the simple idea, I'll field that one, Rick. The simple answer is it's an unlimited number of records. So in the short video we showed here, I think Foxtrot was tackling 6 or 7 records. Foxtrot can automate tasks for virtually an unlimited number of customer accounts or records. Next question here, Rick. How do you handle picking the different radio boxes for picking the right name?
That's all information that you build for decisions into Foxtrot. And then as a result of the decisions made using Foxtrot, looking into the Excel data that I extracted from Prime, scraping information, putting it into different columns within the Excel, doing comparisons back and forth, I then can make a decision just as I would on a manual basis, and then have Foxtrot do the selection of which box to check. So if you document the process step by step of how I would go about merging 2 records manually, you build that logic into Foxtrot.
Okay. In a typical engagement, Rick, are all merges manually verified in a spreadsheet before being submitted to the scripting process?
They are verified somewhat in the spreadsheet, but the bulk of the verification is done in the testing environment utilizing logs that can be built from within Foxtrot, and also the file maintenance reports coming out of the core.
Next question here, Rick. Do you supply, I guess this is sort of in the form of a questionnaire, I think is probably the question, but do you supply questions for us to complete, for the bank to complete to build the script, or does it take advanced technical knowledge on the bank side?
We provide you with the description of each of the fields involved in the project. We discuss with you what your use of that particular field is, if it varies from what the core system intention of that field was. We then look at your data, comparing the data to what you informed us these fields comprised, and then we talk about whatever differences we might see from looking at that data.
Okay.
So we're not giving you questions ahead of time. We're sitting right down with you. Our very first engagement, we call it discovery. The very first meeting typically is a 3 to 4 hour meeting, and there's multiple meetings in that week as well. But we'll go through and walk you through every single piece of data. We'll ask you questions about specification values that you have. We'll ask you to show us the specification value, because if you thought it was one thing but it was something else, that would have a negative impact, but we walk you through every step.
Rick, other than the script process runtime, how long is the typical engagement?
Other than script process and runtime and test time, you could do discovery and a project plan in 7 days.
Okay, and of course, I would assume that's sort of the soup to nuts engagement, consulting, Foxtrot implementation. That's,
well, that was outside of scripts, I thought was the question. So.
Oh yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the scripting.
Go ahead,
the
Rick.
scripting depending upon the complexity of the data, the scripting time could be, a couple, 3, 4 weeks. It depends.
Okay, let's see. We got kind of a tricky question here. We might have to take this one offline, but we'll throw it over to you, Rick, just in case. But this question says, are we able to supply the business analytics format to have the BI guys, I assume that's the business intelligence guys, to build so that we can use Foxtrot to do the dirty work?
I believe the answer is yes.
Okay. Might have to. I think so. Yeah, Zach, we might have to get with you offline on that one, just with an email follow-up. Okay, so if there's no more questions, it's our last chance. We get a few more, but it's probably time now to move on and wrap up. Here's our contact information. We encourage everyone that's on the call today to please contact us and hear more about Foxtrot and how we can help you in your data standardization and merge processes. 800-215-9397 is our number. You see our email address, sales@enablesoft.com, or certainly you can visit us on the web at enablesoft.com. And then before we go, this is a quote we like to use fairly often around here. It's from Henry Ford, who was not a banker, but he knew something about efficiency. And he said, if you need a solution and don't buy it, ultimately you'll find you have paid for it and don't own it. And certainly in this application and with Foxtrot and this software, that's very, very true. So we encourage each of you to take advantage of this and contact us for more information. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Rick, for speaking. We appreciate everyone's time. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon.